It all started with what looked like a simple misunderstanding on a routine flight. An elderly woman, calm and well-dressed, was suddenly approached by security while passengers looked on in confusion. Without much of an explanation, she was escorted off the plane. Cameras came out. Whispers filled the cabin. Most assumed it was a mix-up, maybe an overbooking issue or some paperwork error. But what happened next turned a quiet inconvenience into a storm that would rock the entire airline industry. What no one on that plane knew, what even the airline staff didn't realize, was that the woman being removed wasn't just another passenger. She was a high-level investor, one of the key backers of the airline, with deep pockets and powerful connections. And she wasn't about to let this incident slide. As the story unfolded, things spiraled fast. Her decision after getting pulled from that plane didn't just make headlines, it shook boardrooms. In less than 48 hours, she pulled $500 million in funding from the company. The stock dipped. Executives scrambled. The public wanted answers. But here's the twist. Why was she really pulled off the plane? Was it truly random, or was there something more behind it? The answer might just change how you look at air travel forever. Her name was Margaret Ellison. Most passengers just saw an older woman in a navy cardigan and a quiet smile. What they didn't see was the influence she carried behind the scenes. Margaret wasn't just wealthy, she was a silent partner in several major airlines, including the one she'd just been removed from. She preferred to travel under the radar, never expecting special treatment, never announcing who she was. So when security came for her, without explanation or apology, it was more than embarrassing. It was personal. The airline claimed it was a random seat reassignment issue, but something didn't sit right. Margaret had booked first-class weeks in advance. She had her confirmation email. Even the flight attendants seemed confused by the decision, quietly whispering among themselves as she was taken off. Some passengers captured it on their phones, but the footage was quickly taken down or buried online. Behind the scenes, Margaret made one phone call, just one, and things began to shift. A boardroom emergency meeting. Legal teams alerted, and then a quiet but powerful statement. She was withdrawing her $500 million investment, effective immediately. The airline's leadership was stunned. Still, the question lingered, was this really just a mistake? Or was someone trying to send a message? Margaret had enemies, and now she was ready to find out who was behind it. Margaret didn't go public right away. She knew the power of silence and timing. As the airline scrambled to control the narrative, rumors started swirling online. Some claimed she caused a scene. Others said it had something to do with a flagged passenger list. But Margaret had flown dozens of times that year, always without issue. Something had changed, and quietly she began pulling strings to find out what. Behind closed doors, a whistleblower from within the airline reached out to her legal team. He claimed there had been an internal note attached to her booking, something about a security concern, though it lacked detail. The problem: that note was added just hours before the flight. Margaret hadn't done anything unusual. So who added it, and why? Meanwhile, the airline's top executives were panicking. Losing a $500 million investor wasn't just bad for business, it was catastrophic. The CFO had to answer to stakeholders, and the CEO was suddenly unavailable for comment. Within the company, tensions rose as departments pointed fingers. The legal team suspected a targeted action, but couldn't say by whom. Outside the company, competitors began to circle. If this airline stumbled, others were ready to pounce. And as media outlets started digging, they found something strange. Margaret wasn't the only high-profile passenger who'd recently been quietly removed from flights. Coincidence? Or part of something bigger? As the days passed, the tension only grew. Margaret's quiet determination became a source of mystery even among her closest contacts. She was no longer the calm investor from the shadows, she had become a force. Every conversation with her legal team, Every meeting with her financial advisors was laced with a palpable sense of urgency. She was about to unleash something big. Then, a breakthrough came. Another passenger, a well-known tech entrepreneur, reached out to Margaret, claiming he'd experienced a similar situation. He, too, had been removed from a flight under strange circumstances. This wasn't just about Margaret. It was bigger, much bigger. With this new connection, Margaret's suspicions were confirmed. Something systematic was happening. An unknown entity seemed to be targeting high-profile passengers, people who had influence and power. The thought was chilling. Were these incidents isolated, or was there an agenda at play? And who exactly was pulling the strings? As if to heighten the stakes, the media caught wind of the pattern and began reporting on it. News outlets speculated that this could be the start of a larger scandal. But Margaret wasn't about to let the story be spun by others. She was moving in silence, preparing her next move with calculated precision. But time was running out. The airline's board was meeting soon, and if she didn't act fast, they might cover it all up, making the truth disappear for good. Margaret was ready to strike, but would she be able to get to the heart of the conspiracy before it was too late? The clock was ticking. Just when Margaret thought she had everything in place, the plot took an unexpected turn. Late one evening, her legal team received an encrypted message, an anonymous tip from someone inside the airline's security department. It was a short, cryptic note. Asterisk, watch your back. They know you're coming. Asterisk. Panic shot through her, but she quickly composed herself. This wasn't just a warning. It was a sign that the forces behind her removal were deeper, more powerful than she could have ever imagined. Someone on the inside was playing a dangerous game. But who could it be? The question gnawed at her as she tried to piece together the puzzle. The anonymous source, whoever they were, had provided nothing but chaos. No clues, no explanations, just escalating tension. As the media frenzy around the mysterious passenger removals reached a boiling point, Margaret received another call. This time, it wasn't from a whistleblower. It was from a name she hadn't expected to hear. Robert Sinclair, the airline's chief operating officer. "We need to talk," he said, his voice grave. "This is bigger than you think. You're not just fighting an airline. You're fighting someone far more dangerous." Sinclair warned her of a shadowy group of investors who had quietly infiltrated the airline's upper ranks. These investors were pulling strings, controlling decisions from behind the scenes, and it was them who had orchestrated her removal and everyone else's. They weren't just after money, they wanted power. Power over the airline, and perhaps even over the entire industry. Margaret was stunned. Her instincts told her this wasn't just business as usual. It was a calculated attack. But what were they after? And who could she trust now that the very people she thought she could rely on seemed tangled in a web of deceit? She had one choice left: uncover the hidden investors and take them down before they could bury the truth. But Sinclair's warning echoed in her mind. Asterisk, they know you're coming. Asterisk, time was running out. The stakes had just gone through the roof. Margaret knew she had to act fast. The more she dug into the shadowy group Sinclair had warned her about, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about her getting pulled off a plane. This was a power struggle, one that had been quietly unfolding within the airline for months, maybe even years. These investors weren't just looking for returns, they were looking for control over not only the company, but over the entire market. Armed with the tip from Sinclair, Margaret arranged a secret meeting with him at a neutral location. They met in a small, dimly lit cafe, far away from prying eyes. Sinclair, who had once seemed so loyal, now looked like a man on edge. He explained that the investors had been manipulating internal operations for some time, using their wealth and influence to push the airline toward reckless decisions. The more they tightened their grip, the harder it became for anyone to stand in their way. With a clear target in sight, Margaret knew what she had to do. She called a final meeting with the airline's board of directors. This time, she wasn't just a silent investor. She was the woman who had the power to make or break everything. She laid it all out, the truth behind the security measures, the hidden investors, and their plan to take over the airline. She showed them the evidence, all the pieces that connected the dots. It was a bombshell, one that left the board stunned. But as she wrapped up her presentation, Sinclair's phone buzzed. He glanced at it nervously, his face turning pale. Margaret didn't need to hear the words, she saw it in his eyes. The investors knew they were losing control. They weren't going to go down without a fight. Just then, the doors to the boardroom flew open, and security flooded the room. Margaret's heart skipped a beat, but before she could react, Sinclair stood up, his face hardening. "It's over," he said quietly. "They've won." But then, a voice cut through the tension.